Attorney General Merrick Garland announced the Justice Department would, quote, protect those seeking to obtain or provide reproductive health services, unquote, under a law known as the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. The statement comes days after the Supreme Court declined to block the Texas law that bans abortions after 6 weeks. Democratic strategist Colin Rogero and senior policy analyst at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard, join us now to discuss. Rachel, can you lay out for us, what the legal implications are here and what the Attorney General is able to do under federal law?
Yeah, so everyone's probably aware at this point, Texas has passed a law basically prohibiting abortions after a heartbeat is detected roughly around 6 weeks. Now, the genius of this law, if you're on my side of the aisle, is that it is not enforced by the state. And that gets around some of the issues that have been bedeviling pro-life protections in a lot of other states because it relies on private action. It relies on individuals being able to bring action against anyone who knowingly facilitates or performs an abortion. Now, the Supreme Court, as you mentioned, failed to rule on the merits of this issue. What they did do was rule on the procedure, which basically there was a number of abortion providers in Texas that were trying to bring a claim. But because of the way the law is constructed, they have to wait till the law is actually brought to force against them before they can sue. So the Supreme Court declined, to hear that procedural argument, and as a result has taken no action. Now, what Merrick Garland can do, I think, is up for debate because, again, nothing can be taken against this law until someone brings it against an abortion provider. So there has to be someone who actually brings a claim, a private claim against someone who knowingly facilitates an abortion in this case for something to be done. Now, I'm sure the federal government will bring some of its resources against this, and I think you'll probably see it again litigated to the Supreme Court on the actual merits of the law, which is what we haven't seen yet.
Colin, do you think it's the case? So I've seen a lot of, frankly, I think excitement from some in the Democratic camp that, they think this law is going to be so broadly unpopular that they're going to want to run on this or, run on, look what, kind of thing Republicans are going to bring to your state unless you elect more Democrats. Have you seen that from an organizing perspective?
I think it's a little early to say that it's going to be implemented in all campaigns, but I can say that it is certainly a miscalculation and overreach by the Republican Party if you are looking at it from a campaign perspective. The merits of the law, people can argue. I think it happens to be horrible that rapists have more rights than women who end up being pregnant. And I think it's also horrible that you're going to pit citizens against citizens via a law and have them turning each other in for essentially health care. But that being said, I think you could have a 2018 style repercussion where women are so motivated in certain states and states where there are lots of swing districts where they're saying, we're not going to put up with this. And we see this as a fundamental attack on us. You're going to have turnout amongst women higher than it was previously in 2020 and more looking like 2018, which means probably the Democrats have an opportunity to hold the House here. Now, the question underneath that is whether or not Democrats are going to take advantage of it in a way that is advantageous to them in campaigns. I've yet to see that play out a little bit in the Virginia governor's race, but I think in states like Florida, who could see a similar law try to be passed, and Wilton Simpson has already said that he's ready to bring it into legislation, and we'll see where DeSantis falls on that. I think you could have a real spike in Democratic turnout because of this.
Yeah, Rachel, I'm curious your thoughts on how this is maybe affecting the Republican Party, because quite frankly, first-term abortions are not that unpopular. And with this sort of eliminating the ability or the ease of access of an abortion at 6 weeks is really early. And I don't know how popular that idea actually is, even on the Republican side. So do you think this is going to sort of shock Republicans? And do you think they're scrambling, feeling like, oh, no, this is not really a good strategy going forward if we want to win some midterms?
Well, I hope not, frankly, because the Republican Party for years has said they are the party of pro-life. They have said they are the party that protects life from conception and in many cases to natural death. If we are unable to make that case, and if we have Republicans who run from making that argument, then that's on us. right, then we haven't been genuine about what it is that we truly believe. And I do think that there are a lot of pro-life Americans who look at their Republican Congress and they're frustrated by the fact that, for years, these Republican politicians give head pats, rhetorical head pats to being pro-life, but never actually do anything of substance. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of laws at the state level, because it's not just Texas, right? It's Ohio, it's Mississippi, it's all these, red states that I think the voters there who genuinely believe, because again, there's a lot of hand waving about, the pro-life argument. But for people who are pro-life, it's not about, the patriarchy. It's not about trying to assert control over women. It's about the fact that they believe that that's a human baby, that a beating heart represents a life that should be protected. There's a lot of people that believe that. And so they want to see their beliefs, represented by the people, who are elected to, again, represent what they believe. So look, I think the rubber hits the road for the Republican Party here a little bit. You have Republicans who want to run for this, fine. Then, you can't stand by one plank of your party that you're not willing to defend. And so I think that's what we're going to see kind of across the country if this does come up in certain races. And again, if we are unable to defend our position, then that's on us. It's no one else's fault but ours.
6 weeks, though? 6 weeks is early. I mean, I don't know how many people really support banning abortions completely. And that's almost essentially what this does.
Well, it does make an exception for medical emergencies, although, as Colin pointed out, sort of the traditional exceptions for rape and incest are not in this Texas law. So, I guess we'll find out. I think there's a lot of pro-lifers who look at the left and who say, look, they have no compunction about being as extreme as they state. I think the governor's race in Virginia, Colin mentioned that. You have a current sitting governor of Virginia, a former pediatric neurosurgeon who had no compunction about saying, if a botched abortion takes place, the baby's born alive, we'll make it comfortable, and then we'll decide whether or not we should terminate the life. I mean, you have the left saying that. You have repeal of the Hyde Amendment across the federal level, which is, which was a longstanding détente on this issue between Republicans and Democrats, supported by even Joe Biden, I think up until as recently as 2015. That's being shed. So I do think you have people on the right who say, well, if the left is going to be as extreme as that, why are we not pushing for our positions? Now, you may be right. It may divide Republican voters or it may not. I think this is still an issue where a lot of people, if you actually talk about it on the merits, it's a difficult ethical and moral choice for a lot of people.
And so, to your point, the Hill's Julia Manchester reports that Democrats in Virginia are seeking to tie the Republican candidates to the law in Texas. Democratic gubernatorial nominee Terry McAuliffe called out his opponent Glenn Youngkin in a press call, referring to Youngkin as the most anti-choice candidate in the history of Virginia, adding that if Virginia elects Youngkin to the House, there's a good chance what happened in Texas can happen in Virginia. And Rachel, I'm curious, and Colin, be curious for your take on this too. For years, Democrats were kind of content to bring up abortion, to drive out the vote right around election time, but otherwise didn't really want to get too deeply involved in the issue. In fact, the Hyde Amendment is still to this, even though it's verboten for a presidential candidate to support it, the Hyde Amendment is still part of the budgets that the Democrats pass in Congress. And they, as far as I know, they're going to, unless there's pressure against them, they will include it in the upcoming budget. Do you think this could end up polarizing the issue in a way that it hasn't been before? Like to have a Democratic Attorney General say that they're going to send that they're going to send federal resources into Texas to protect the right to access reproductive health seems like a ratcheting up of the polarization of this in a way that could really fundamentally change the debate.
Yeah, I think it will. And I think Rachel made an important point here that I happen to agree with. She said that the rubber hits the road for the Republican Party on this issue now. And that's right, because in some ways, access to reproductive health care for women has been moderately protected, even though some legislatures have tried to make some jumps to the right and make it more difficult. It's been moderately protected. So it's been a polarizing issue for years. I mean, there's not been an election I can remember that it's not been a polarizing issue. However, knowing the data from years past and even current years, this is not a popular thing with most Republican women. So the rubber is going to hit the road, and it's not going to be good for the Republican Party. And I think people are going to see it as a giant overreach when they talk about 6 weeks. Women who may be pro-life are going to say, I didn't even know I was pregnant at 6 weeks. And I think they're going to look at that and say, hey, this may be a step too far. And while, yes, I think Republicans do want, a small segment of the Republican Party wants legislatures who will stand up for their far right, in my opinion, extremist views and create this kind of Christian caliphate idea that Texas has now created. And there's going to be a lot of backlash against it. It's going to be to the benefit of Democrats if Democrats can capture the energy correctly. And I think, look, they're right. Forever and ever, every Democrat in existence has been, for increasing taxes, whether that's actually true or not. So now every Republican is going to probably be for these restrictive abortion laws, whether they actually are or not.
Yeah, and we focused a lot on the 6 weeks aspect of it, but almost the more novel part is the enforcement mechanism, and then the facilitating an abortion could get you in trouble. Then what constitutes facilitating? Would that go into territory along First Amendment advocacy, protected speech, protected expression, that kind of thing? That'll be, I think, a very interesting question for the Supreme Court to eventually take up, regardless of how you feel about the underlying issue. Thanks so much to both of you for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
More Rising after this.